Hello there, and welcome to Thank the Maker, a podcast about heroes, princesses, scoundrels, hokey religions, ancient weapons, and all things Star Wars. I'm Adam Russell.
And I am Mike Forrester. It's a duo pod tonight, Adam, because people are out there in the world being busy, doing things, except for you and me. Somehow.
We're being busy doing things locally.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So tell us what's going on, Adam. I feel like there's been a lot of things that are happening for you behind the scenes. Let's give the people a little tease of what's going on, because it's about to get very busy for you as Nick is wrapping up Bayside-ness for the year. You're about to ramp up.
Absolutely. We just got back from Brazil. We've podcasted since I've been back, right? We talked about that?
Yes. Yeah? Yes.
Okay. But now we are, we're quickly approaching the 11th hour, detonation for new music release, all the deadlines, artwork, music videos, we got mixing and all that kind of stuff done. Album's done, but there's all this other stuff that goes along with it. So I've been working every day on music video stuff, writing, prevising, just did a location scout today. Props, wardrobe, like all this kind of stuff. It's not like big budget movie making. It's not even like, some of the bigger bands movie or video budgets. It's very DIY. We do it with the director here in St. Louis called a dude named Jordan Phoenix, friend of ours that we've worked with many times. It's a lot of work. I'm co-directing with him, so I mean, I'm over here on my floor making props out of foam and stuff.
Is it safe to say that the music videos still are serving a purpose? I think of with Spotify specifically having a lot of video support now. That's not really like the focal point, I think, but you look at like how many bands will have a background loop or something like that. Like that does seem to be turning into a thing where it almost seems like visuals are now, rather than the lyric video, which I think was all the rage during COVID because people weren't able to do stuff. But now, I mean, Yellowcard's new video for Better Days crushed. And it seems like you guys, the video for War was all time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, is there still merit in going, we're going to make an amazing music video? It still has to have value, I assume.
Yeah, it's so interesting because budgets are bigger now than they were 10 years ago, but they're still a fraction of what they were 20 years ago.
Right.
Our first video was $75,000, and that was cheap. The director was like, we got to make this work somehow. We really want to do this video. I guess we can make it work for $75,000 in 2003.
Yeah.
Our second video was $225,000. That was a normal budget, and was like, okay, yeah, you're on a major label. That's what you spend. And now it's like for a band to get 5, 10, 20 grand is like, oh, somebody's putting up money.
Sure.
And this is 20 years later with inflation and all this kind of stuff now. So it's wild. It's the kind of thing that we wouldn't be able to do at the level we've been doing without our team of collaborators here in St. Louis. And, this little ragtag band of filmmakers, in a city that isn't known for filmmaking.
Yeah.
It's pretty
cool. Like from the standpoint of like where technology has come in, you could look at, of course, when you're going, there's a $250,000 budget that rents the cameras and all of the stuff. But now it's like, you're the largest you might see it is maybe a 4K TV, but most people are going to watch it on their phones. They're going to watch it on YouTube for 1080p. A lot of $1,500, $2,000 cameras that most photographers have as their daily drivers at this point can shoot much higher quality stuff now. Do you feel like that's like righting the ship a little bit in terms of like just pure visual, or are people still going all out? Is Jordan going all out, and is he still trying to get reds and the big rigs and all that?
It is really interesting because, like you said, the phone in your pocket is vastly more powerful than the $100,000 camera 20 years ago, right? But also, our first 4 or 5 videos were all shot on film.
Yeah.
Actually, all the way up until 2010, everything was shot on film, 16 and 35 millimeter film. And the film itself...
That seems late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because we worked with a director named Ryan Smith who did, Simple Plan and Good Charlotte and all those pop punk videos in the early days, and he's an old school filmmaker, he
Right.
he loves the look of film. He kinda reluctantly moved to digital at, much later in the game, but, like, our 4th album, I guess, the song "I'm Alive," we shot that on 16 millimeter film because he said, "Let's do it. We can get it,"
That's
you know?
awesome.
But yeah, the film itself is expensive, and then the camera systems to rent those are expensive, the big old, Panavision,
Yeah. Yeah.
Airflex or fucking what no, sorry,
Cineflex or
yeah,
whatever they're
all
called.
the
Yeah.
old yeah, those old fuckers are expensive to rent. Now it's much cheaper to get the camera, but everything else that goes with it, ultimately, like, filmmaking isn't just about the medium that you capture it on, it's about location, it's about the way you light. I mean, lighting is everything, ultimately.
Right.
Lighting
Right.
is everything, and that's still expensive. Although it's cheaper, LEDs are now, like, the main source of lighting for most things. If you want, the rays of God coming through the window like
You
we had
need the Fresnels.
like, the first video that we did on the last album, "Tear Me to Pieces," although it came out second, we spent all the money on that, and we got this giant old school, light with that had its own generator and everything, just
Yeah.
beaming, like the
Yeah.
rays
Yeah. And it
of
gets
the sun.
hot. It literally could
Yeah.
melt things. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just to rent that thing is still expensive. So it
Right.
depends on what you wanna do, it depends on the concept. Um, I mean, I don't know. You can make the best video anyone's seen on an iPhone with an amazing concept, or you can make something that's completely shit and spend a ton of money.
Sure. Sure. Well, based on what you've said pre-show, we're not going to give too much away. I've heard the album. The album is awesome. People should be very excited for that because I think it's a very it feels like a logical evolution of Tear Me to Pieces. It's awesome. There's a lot of parts I remember listening to it and being like, whoa, this is pretty cool that you guys went there. I'm very excited for it to hear the final mixes and all that. So man, it's like for all the boys, Yellow Card is going on tour right now with the Day to Remember. Nick's
Mhm.
wrapping up Bayside. You're about to go on a bunch of tour dates.
Yep.
This is a year for Thank the Maker.
Yeah. It's a busy, busy year, and we're trying to, thank the maker and, associated parties have some stuff up our sleeves for the coming year and the following year that people will be super pumped on. So,
Yeah, that's
just
good.
had a
That's
little talk the
real
other
good.
night with everybody here on the call.
We like it. We like it. Okay, so we have a simple little. We're kind of like in these transitional things. Nick wants to be part of certain conversations. We've got to have him on, but if he's not here, we got to push it back. But something very interesting.
Speaking of
Uh,
filmmaking,
Speaking of filmmaking, Tony Gilroy, everyone's favorite director as of recent in regards to Star Wars, went on the House of R.
yes, one of the Ringerverse, podcasts, one of the Ringer Podcast Network podcasts, House of R, hosted by Joanna Robinson and, Mallory Rubin.
Yes.
Great
Okay.
podcast.
Let me pull up the quote because I thought it was interesting. And of course, everyone takes it a little bit out of context, but this was an interesting thing to say. So, of course, we're talking about, for him looking back on, Andor has now won multiple Emmys nominations, which is huge, or actual Emmys. I'm sorry, and that's huge for Disney Plus because I think for a long time they've been trying to get Star Wars up to that level
Mhm.
that it's not just sound editing or something like that. They
Yeah.
want that. So
The
the
reboot
fact that
schedule was a push for Emmy nominations, we know that.
yeah, exactly. So Michael Wilkinson for costuming, absolutely worth it. I think you're really just seeing people just say, yeah, this was an amazing production. But the most important thing that he said here, which I thought was interesting, of course, the internet is going to love this. They said it's driven us crazy on the show because every time the clickbait, they're trying to draw controversy between us and other shows. By the same token, it would be very wrong to come in and reproduce Andor. There has to be a hook, a reason you want to bring your game there, he said. Telling the creators, let your freak flag fly and do what you do best. So, this was kind of a comment of saying he had said this. He said, Kathy has a very difficult time of trying to balance where Star Wars is right now. You've got Skeleton Crew, you've got Mandalorian, you've got animated shows that people are really into, and then you have Andor over here as this, Emmy focused drama. Very hard for people to do that. But then, as he's saying, if you're comparing the Mandalorian to Andor, you're looking at these projects all wrong. But the interesting part that he said was how many billions of beings are in this galaxy? How many corners of it are unexplored? While teasing exciting projects to come in the near future, he said there are some things that Lucasfilm is building that are really unusual, I think. And I think the lesson is being taken to heart. So, our discussion can be a short one tonight is what could those projects be from Gilroy's standpoint, which
Mm,
is that he's not a total Star Wars nerd. So something as goofy as Neil or
mhm.
something as goofy as Wookiee is probably goofy to him, weird to him. So we're trying to figure out what do we think that could be. Of course, we want everyone in the comments to tell us what they think it could be, but it's an interesting thing because as we talked about, Gilroy is a fan of history. And so from his standpoint of saying he doesn't think that Lucasfilm should say, how do we get another Andor level drama? They're kind of saying, how do we invest the time and the vision into other projects? So, what do we think?
When I think about, to your point of him not being the biggest fan of Star Wars and the sci-fi, campy creature effects respect, something that might strike him as weird would be focusing on a specific character with a specific species that is known and loved by Star Wars fans, but might come across someone's desk who writes things like Gilroy does
Right.
and make him think, so you want me to write this interpersonal conflict drama thing about this guy with like a long blue nose or something. You know what I mean? Like what? Um, because I mean, Andor, as we know, didn't feature a ton of aliens. It was
Right.
very much about the human element of it. And being focused on the Empire, I mean, that's natural, that makes sense. But like you said, Gilroy being a student of history, and not just history, but the sort of the history of human conflict,
Right.
sort of another side of the same coin that Lucas is on, being a student of the history of human conflict, but via storytelling and the archetypes of storytelling.
Right.
Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Right.
Looking at all the same stuff, George is a guy who grew up, a boomer that grew up experiencing the Vietnam War through the eyes of a young person who just hated that conflict and all the shit that was going on then,
Sure.
but still like took this like classical storytelling approach. So Gilroy is a version of that, but he's talked about writing Andor not about what's going on now. Of course, people relate it to what's going on now, but to him, it's just the endless wash, rinse, and repeat cycle of human conflict, global conflict, and the stuff that's in human nature. So to adapt that to something else, like what I mean, you made a joke about Max Rebo or something before we went on.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm thinking something like that, or like the Wookiees, like trying to tell a story where we can. It's, I mean, it's for all intents and purposes a foreign film.
Sure.
If you do something like the Wookiees,
Right.
and it's subtitled or there's no dialogue, like the damn
Mm.
holiday special for the first 13 minutes.
Right.
Something in that realm. What do you think?
It's hard to say because I think from his standpoint, Tony Gilroy is he's a fan of history, right? And there are so many moments, especially I think what you saw a lot of um, desperation. You saw a
Mhm.
lot of acts of heroism around these big global conflicts, right? So you're going to see a lot of political drama in World War One. You're not going to see as much political drama as the just straight up conflict of World War II. But there were a lot of really interesting things that went on, like the ghost cities, the inflatable ghost cities. Have we talked about this before?
I don't think so.
The U.S. government was basically making blow up balloons that looked like tanks. And they were putting them all over the place to basically just throw off wherever their actual tanks were.
Oh,
And they
whoa.
would build like, huge cardboard and wood silhouettes that they would put in trees. And then basically like any kind of, air surveillance would be like, oh, we see them over there. And they would be miles and miles away. They went so far into certain places like Kansas and other places where they were developing airplanes and they had hangars. They actually were building um, like canvas netting on top of these warehouses to throw off, just in case if there was an air raid or something like that, it would throw off the fact that they didn't really, thermal imaging and all this stuff wasn't really a thing. And so it relied on pilot's sightline. And so if there was just the littlest amount to be able to throw something off, those were just these little tricks that, modern warfare was developing at the time that was almost like parlor tricks, right?
Hmm.
You have I think they were called the Night Witches from in Russia, which was a group of mostly female pilots that were flying essentially these bombing raids in the middle of the night with single prop airplanes. They were turning their engines off and doing these super low strafing bombing missions deep into like deep over enemy lines, but they were too low for them to pick up or be able to see. And some of them got captured, they would escape. There's all these amazing things that I'm sure Tony Gilroy was like, you can adapt any of this to Star Wars. That would be
Hmm.
awesome. But I think when you look at it from the standpoint of saying, if we were to zoom out, you look at something like, let's say, Boba Fett. Boba Fett is the character that, of course, that everyone wants to say, like, maybe we want justification for the fact that the last time we saw Boba Fett was a COVID project. There were a lot
Hmm.
of frustrations that were going on with being able to jam. The CEO is saying we want 6 shows all in the next 3 years. We're looking for people who are available. We're shooting this thing through COVID. I understand a lot of people think Boba Fett was a frustrating production. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who worked on the production that would agree with that. But Boba Fett is this one character in Star Wars that I think most of the fandom would enjoy. But I can understand why Gilroy would say he's not that interesting to me, because a lot of the lone gunslinger bounty hunters as a concept were largely romanticized in this Wild West, the stuff that George actually really loved. We would come historically to find out that the Wild West wasn't actually all that wild. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? A lot of it was Hollywoodized and romanticized, much different than the way that we see it, of the lone gunslinger at high noon and all this stuff. And so I can see how Gilroy would say that's not that interesting to me, which is why he would say possibly these are odd choices at
Hmm.
Lucasfilm, right? But like for everybody else, they'd be like, he wants the enemy at the gates. You know what I mean? He wants the Russians to, only have 20,000 men on the front line, but they only have 5,000 guns. And so if you got shot, you had to pick up your partner's gun, or like just
Hmm.
crazy stories that he's more into because he's a fan of history, versus George loved the Kurosawa films. He loved
Hmm.
the romantic versions of these stories that we come to know in Star Wars. So it's
Like,
interesting to think about from Gilroy's standpoint of saying what he would think is interesting.
yeah, when I think Lucas, I think of imagery. I think of
Yeah.
the Kurosawa films that you can watch on mute,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not even read the subtitles.
Right.
Um,
Ran and all these incredible films.
yeah, and George talked about, well, actually, I think it was maybe John Williams referred to the original trilogy. I mean, all the Star Wars films, really. He thought of them like silent films. The
Yeah.
music and the images speak the loudest. Whereas Gilroy, it's like he's in that more like Aaron Sorkin leaning fast talking, like dense
Right.
interpersonal conflict type thing that's more about what's said, whether it's verbally or with the nuance of performance.
Right.
It's a whole different approach because Lucas also famously is not a great director of actors. He's
Yeah.
thinking like big picture rather than the stuff he got in the original trilogy was a happy accident of having Harrison Ford there throughout all of the auditions, feeding lines, and then the chemistry between the characters, right?
Sure. Sure.
Something he wasn't able to recreate in that same way, lightning in a bottle kind of way in the prequels. So, um, I can see, yeah, to your point about something like Boba Fett, like a lone wolf kind of situation. He's saying, okay, where's the deep interpersonal conflict that I can pull out of this? What do I put this guy into to make this something that's interesting to me?
Right.
Because I don't like the idea of him just like bouncing from town to town, shooting some people up, solving, mission of the week style. Like I,
Yeah. Yeah.
I, I can't see that working for him at all,
Right.
or being compelling enough to get on board.
Right.
So if they want him badly enough and they say this is what we're working on, he might say that's an odd choice. How can I spin this?
Sure. Yeah. And I think so we know that Maul Shadow Lord is coming.
Mm,
Someone at a con recently kind of got it out of Jim Cummings that like Hondo is going to be back, which then people speculated, where is Hondo Onaka going to be? Could be in Maul Shadow Lord, which would make sense. Maul's running the underground. He needs
mhm.
pirates who are running stuff. Like it's hard because given the trailer that we saw, the Maul series looks dark. It looks very dark
Yeah.
in terms of its concept, in terms of what it is. And so it would be weird to see someone like Hondo show up, which makes me think that, of course, it could be DLC for Star Wars Outlaws, even though they said they're not working on that. It could be something for Galaxy's Edge. It could be so many things.
Also, though, having someone as kind of jovial and lighthearted as Hondo is, even though the first time we meet him, he actually kills a bunch of people. Um,
Clone Wars Hondo is actually a very dark character.
Pretty gnarly if you
Yeah.
like. We look at him so lovingly. He was a piece of shit.
Yeah, totally.
Um, but I can see him coming on with that, hey, oh buddy, whatever, and Maul going so dark with it, choking him out, putting him in a situation where like I'm not here to laugh.
You
We're
are a
not here.
fool.
Yeah, we're not here to joke. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see that being fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So but if you think about that, look at from the City of God. You've seen this movie, an amazing film, Brazilian film, I believe,
I
which
don't know.
is or it's South American. Incredible movie about just how youth are like the power dynamics that shift, that like kids when they're brought into a world of violence, they actually
I have seen it. Yeah,
yeah, they become incredibly um they grow up very quickly, but then also understand the power dynamics of like how the world works very quickly in terms of like how who's in charge, all of this. um and so I could see something where Disney knows that who's in charge of a lot of who's green lighting productions right now. It's
hmm
Dave Filoni. And so I think Dave is kind of at a point where, he still has, Dave is very transparent. He loves his characters that he loves. And I could see Maul Shadow Lord, where we see him in his, what we would consider probably to be peak power. There is still a lot to explore on Dathomir. There's still a lot to explore of like how he becomes the apprentice. And I'm sure that there's comic books and I'm sure there's all these things, but for Maul as a character to a City of God approach of like, how does Maul become the peak brother of the Night Brothers? How does he become the one that like, is able to tap into the Force in a way that's different than other things? So I could see Gilroy also saying, you're taking a legacy character that we already know his end multiple times at this point, and you're developing that again. That
yeah,
could seem very odd to him. But for someone like Dave Filoni, he'll play with that character in that sandbox as much as he wants.
yeah.
So I could see Maul getting more development beyond just what we're already expecting.
Or the Night Sisters might also be to him the concept of like magic and witches in Star Wars might
Sure.
be a double.
Yeah.
Excuse
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
kind of
right,
thing.
right. And I can only imagine that for Tony Gilroy to sit down and listen to what they're doing for Ahsoka season 2. He's like,
Yeah.
"What?
Yeah.
What's happening? What's going on here?" He's like, so it's like, no, it's all magic, and then you got the military power, and it's like, oh, good. So the Empire. It's like, well, not really. They're dead, and he
Yeah.
brought them all back, and then there's magic, and I can see Gilroy looking at that and going, okay, okay, sounds good. Call me when you need me.
Yeah,
Um,
so people wanna see that, you're saying? People wanna
yeah, exactly. But I think if you're looking at other projects that we could see, we've pitched a couple different movies, but again, it's like now we're putting ourselves at a point where we have Starfighter is the long project. That seems to have, we've got a kid. There's other characters in here. It seems like we've got kind of the, reluctant hero taking on a young, I don't want to say Padawan, but I think that there's gonna be some kind of development in it because the two characters that they decided to show, of course, is you're gonna put Ryan Gosling as the main character, and then you're gonna announce the cast, and everyone said, "Who is that kid? What's going on here?"
Yeah.
So, what do you develop in between Ahsoka season 2 and Starfighter and Mando Grogu, which just seems like it's going to be a straight up Star Wars action film, which is totally fine for me. So
Mhm.
what else are you developing in between those slates that gives you the idea of where we're heading for the next 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years?
Well, let's look at Gilroy's IMDb and just think about some things. Put it in context because we all, we think Rogue One, we think Andor, we think the Bourne series, and for me, number 1 is Michael Clayton, a corporate espionage, political drama kinda thing. But you go back to the beginning, his first writing credit is The Cutting Edge in 1992, a movie about a hockey player who pairs up with a figure skater to try to win the gold in, couples figure skating or whatever it's called.
High stakes
Nothing
political drama.
yeah, nothing
Absolutely.
nothing about that makes sense to me with the Tony Gilroy we know now, but he also, he wrote The Devil's Advocate. He did the first adaptation or the adaptation of a draft of Armageddon. He did the movie Proof of Life, and then, he got so into the Bourne thing until, like, The Great Wall with Matt Damon.
That was
It's
a paycheck getter.
yeah. I mean, then again, who knows what it was in his mind before the director got a hold of it and it became what it became. But State of Play, that's another political one. That's Matt Damon. I mean, sorry, uh, Ben Affleck. Devil's Advocate. Yeah. Beirut. So, for better or for worse, TV movie. I mean, like Dolores Claiborne. He did some things early on that. Oh, what is this? Yeah. He did some things that are maybe unexpected looking back, but actually, The Devil's Advocate is a really interesting one to me in this because just like the supernatural element of it, the
There's
idea of like
fantastical
the
elements in it. Yeah.
yeah, the devil,
Yeah.
the devil in the flesh in the world,
Al
Al
Pacino.
Pacino boiling
Yeah.
holy water with his fingertip, like
Right.
that is off brand for the with the current conception of what we think Tony Gilroy is. So
But he's a very cutting character in the way that he's presented, and it's like,
yeah,
you kind of look at, like, someone who's like, a person who has ultimate power. What's interesting from his standpoint is the interesting characters in history believe that they have the power of someone who's all-seeing or
right.
whatever, right? So, I can understand again, but this is the thing, it's like, we look at stories. I think sometimes we get really into the idea of going, oh man, is this, is this character that's beloved? Is that going to move the needle? Right. And it's still a huge risk at the time for Disney to go, we're going to greenlight 2 very expensive seasons for Cassian Andor, which
Right.
again, when they announced this show, people were like, what? A show about this guy? And ended up just annihilating everyone's expectations.
Mhm.
So you look at it from the business side of things that I think he could also look at and go, that's odd, where you're either developing legacy projects or you're developing legacy characters. And from a standpoint like Bourne, there is still that element of like a deep state. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Which we definitely got into in Andor, but like we didn't really get the almost like the super soldier, which I think Bourne, Jason Bourne ended up kind of being this like he was so believable, but he definitely had in some ways like the plot armor was out of
Right.
control. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you're jumping out of buildings, skyscrapers, and crashing through another window, you're like, okay, you know what I mean? But I just think the way that they handled Bourne definitely had, we haven't seen that kind of Cassian was still more grounded than I think the Bourne movies were.
Yeah.
And so you think about it from going, what would Bourne look like in Star Wars, which I know that a lot of we saw familiar parts because he wrote them that way. But like, what would a, is the character like Bourne? Is he more, does he have the Star Wars swag, the scoundrel swag, or is he more like how Cassian was, on edge constantly, can't know who to trust, has his crew constantly in conflict, like that. It's an interesting thing to think about. And I hope we get more of what Gilroy finds to be odd in Star
Yeah,
Wars.
absolutely. Well, let's wrap up here and continue this conversation with the patrons for a little bit longer for the bonus segment. We got they're doing some talking in Discord, some different ideas that are
Ooh,
pretty
yeah.
interesting. So
Mhm.
let's cook with those, marinate a little bit, and we'll see you guys next week. Is Nick gonna be back? Do we know?
I think that's the plan.
All right,
We'll see.
we shall see. Everyone, thanks for being here with us again. Merch is available. Thankthemakermerch.com. Handful of t-shirts and things. Buy them. It helps. We love you guys. Until next week, may the force be with you. Thank the Maker is produced by Adam Russell and Jason Chiodo and edited by Jason Chiodo. If you enjoy the podcast, you can support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Or you can support us directly at patreon.com/thankthemakerpod, where you can get access to our Discord server, exclusive content, exclusive merch, and more. Our patrons literally make Thank the Maker possible.